All Blacks depth chart for 2024, folks. How has Razor been managing his squad in his first year in charge of the ABs? That's what we're going to have a look at today. We'll go through the players that he has used, break it down by position, which guys have been getting the lion's share of the game time, which guys have been the backups, are any guys kind of only in there with token minutes. We'll go through this. Compare it to some of the other squads. We've already had a look at South Africa and Ireland if you want to see the way their coaches have been managing their squads. Spoiler alert, Andy Farrell's been a lot more consistent with the Irish squad in terms of giving his starters a go compared to Rassie Erasmus, who's been a little bit more in the kind of rotation over consistency camp. But we'll go through the All Blacks. You guys can let us know your thoughts on which of the All Blacks guys need more game time, keeping in mind that we've already lost several of the players I'm about to mention overseas, which means they will no longer be All Blacks eligible. Let's start with the front row. If we're looking at 1, 2, and 3, number 1 is a pretty nice even split. I reckon if you were going to decide, like, what's the optimal split between having the game time of your starting guy, your backup, and then your third choice guy who maybe gets a go in the kind of lesser games, to put it kindly, I think this is a pretty healthy breakdown. So Mighty Williams has got just under half of the game time this year at loose head. Ethan de Groot is around about just under a third, and then Ofatu'ungafasi just under a quarter of the game time. So you got 3 guys, 1, 2, 3. They've all had a decent enough amount of game time, but at least at the end of the year, Mighty Williams has emerged as the kind of premier loosehead prop for the All Blacks, probably overtaking de Groot, who got himself into a little bit of hot water in terms of the code of conduct stuff. Seemed to kind of drop his place in the pecking order. That can happen. Sometimes when you sit out for a week, somebody else can replace you. That seems to be what happens here. Tamaiti's a big unit. But yeah, I think that's a pretty healthy split. I think all those guys are pretty good value. Then we look at hooker, Cody Taylor and Asofo Abua. It's pretty much these guys with a little sliver of George Bell. So Taylor's there in black, Almua's there in white, and then George Bell's there in grey. George Bell is living off scraps in terms of the minutes. Taylor is absolutely the premier choice, almost 60% of the game time this year, and he's been in great form, so there's no knocking him. Almua has had a couple of games where, Taylor was unavailable or whatever, and he showed up, which is pleasing. But essentially, we are looking at 2 first-choice guys and some scraps. I mean, George Bell is a promising youngster, and he will get better, but there's not been a kind of heck of a lot of faith shown in him just yet. And then Tighthead, Tyrell Lomax is the kind of most dominant guy in terms of any one guy in his position in the front row. 65% of the game time, maybe too much game time. Like if you look at some of the other squads, not all of them. Again, you look at the Box and the Irish manage things very differently. But Lomax, for a prop, plays a lot of minutes in comparison to, say, the Springboks starting props. They usually pull the starting props a lot earlier. We saw Lomax get yellow carded at least once when he was pretty tired, playing pretty deep minutes. But he's played 65% of the game time. That's him in black. Fletcher Newell's there in white, and then Pasalio Tosi is there in white. He's one of the kind of newcomers. Another big unit dude who will likely go from strength to strength. But yeah, that's the most eggs in kind of one basket is the Tyrell Lomax one. You wouldn't want him to go down just based on how much game time he has been getting. He is certainly the premier tight head in All Blacks rugby. Second row, the locks. Obviously, you got Scotty Barrett there in the number 4 jersey in black, so he dominates the game time. That's 100% to be expected because he is the captain of the side. He's playing close to 80% of the game time. Behind him in white is Sam Darry, again, one of the kind of newcomers. Has looked all right in some of the games. He will also get better with experience. And then Josh Lord has had a bit of a disrupted season, and that's reflected by that kind of sliver of grey that he gets at the top there. And then number 5, Tupou Vaa'i, has had a brilliant, I was going to say breakthrough, but it's not breakthrough because he's been around for a bit longer than that. He's had a bloody good season. 65% of the game time for him, and I think quite rightly, he has been one of the premier line-out disruptors on defensive line-out ball of any team in the world. He's been fantastic, so it's good to see him getting regular game time, and then Patrick Tuipulotu is behind him with about a third. The only thing that means is we don't have a heck of a lot of game time for Sam Darry. packing down at Tighthead lock. I guess if you combine Sam Derry's either jersey number 4 or 5 or whatever replacement jersey he's got on number 19, he's got around about a fifth of the game time this year. So Sam Derry has been getting decent amount of game time, reasonable for a guy who's kind of the fourth choice lock in New Zealand rugby. Between Scotty Barrett, Tupavai and Paddy Tupulotu, I think we've done all right in terms of replacing, Sam Whitelock, Brodie Retallick. So, yeah, Scotty Barrett still has question marks about his captaincy, but you feel like he's going to grow into the role as well, at least one would hope. Back row is an interesting one because obviously this is where we see Sam Cane, and he's retiring. But we'll start with the blind side. Retiring from New Zealand rugby, not all rugby. Blind side, it's good to see a proper bolter, and it's one thing that the All Blacks are reasonably good at doing, is giving bolters a chance. And Wallace Satiti is that guy, the black bar for the number 6 jersey. Around 40% of the game time, which is bloody impressive for a guy who's literally in his first year of international rugby. So to go from being a guy not even in the All Blacks to being their premier number 6 is a heck of an endorsement for the way he has played this year. Behind him is Ethan Blackadder in white. He's obviously had another injury disrupted season. You have to wonder about that guy in terms of how many chances do you keep giving him, because he doesn't seem to be able to stay fit for any extended period. I mean, I don't have anything against him, but dude has got really bad luck with injuries. Samapini Finau in grey, you'd say the fact that he was surpassed by Satiti is unfortunate for him because he's a big, big dude. And he certainly went off one game really early where he kind of took a head knock, which has limited his game time to around about a fifth of the game time, but kind of went into this year as the probable guy to take the number 6 jersey by the scruff of the neck, but sadly for him it didn't happen. Luke Jacobson there in red, also another injury disrupted season, and Adi Savia in a pinch has had to cover the blind side at times. For the open side, Sam Cane is there with over half the game time at number 7. And I said that's a little bit concerning in that those minutes, if you're looking at depth chart and building to a World Cup, those minutes are gone. There's no long-term gain from those minutes. It's only short-term in terms of let's win this game, which is a balance that Razor has to decide between. Do you pick the strongest team for now, or do you pick a squad which is going to be the strongest team of the 2027 Rugby World Cup? Well, he gave Sam Cane, I mean, to be fair, the likes of Papali'i, Jacobson, Blackadder were all injured at times, so the loose forward depth was certainly being tested, but Sam Cane was given that faith by Razor. So he's there with over half the game time. Papali'i gets around about a quarter of the game time as the second number 7 in New Zealand rugby. Obviously, as I said, injury disrupted his season. Then Peter Lakai is one of those kind of bolter guys who was, again, thrust through the ranks, partly due to injury, All Blacks 15, and then into the All Blacks proper. He gets around about 10% of the game time. Then you got Blackadder, Jacobson, and Savia with all kind of really limited time. Blackadder, less than 10% of the time is not a heck of a lot. If you combine his 6 and 7 time, then it's a more sizable chunk for him. But as I said, he just missed so much of the season with injury. Then number 8, there's only 2 guys. Adi Savia played a ton of rugby for the ABs this year, and when he wasn't playing there, it was Wallace Satiti. So, yeah, that's pretty crystal. That's the first position, and I think the only position which is just 2 guys. Two pretty good players. You got not this year, but last year's former World Player of the Year in Adi Savia, and the Breakthrough Player of the Year from this year, Wallace Satiti. So we seem to be pretty decently stocked at number 8. Then we get into the backs, and we do have some more of those kind of down the drain minutes if you're looking at building to a World Cup, and I'm looking at TJ Perenara, but he's not the first choice 9, just barely. Cortez Ratema is above him there in black with around about just over a third of the game time. TJ is behind him in white. But again, if you're thinking about depth chart building, those minutes are gone because he's off to Japan, so no longer eligible. And then Cam Roigard is there in grey. Roigard would certainly get a bigger chunk of the pie if he wasn't injured for as long as he was. I feel like if we look at this depth chart for 2025, as long as Roigard stays fit, he will be getting surely around about 50% of the game time, one would think. You got Finlay Christie there in red, and then Noah Hotham there in blue. Christie seems to have fallen down the pecking order, and Hotham seems to be I guess with Roygaard and Ratema there, probably Razor's third choice guy. So he has had a taste of test action, but still pretty limited game time. Then number 10, it's basically two guys. D-Mac with around about 70% of the game time and Bodie with the other 30. And then you got Harry Plummer with 3 minutes. But his 3 minutes are also gone because he's heading overseas. So is unlikely to be called upon for All Blacks duties in future. So it's D-Mac and Bodie. Now obviously there's the Richie Mo'unga question. If he came back after his contract with Japan, in Japan, maybe he slots back in at 10 for Razor. If Razor can get the eligibility rules changed, maybe Richie slots back in. But for the moment, it is D-Mac and Bodie. D-Mac got a heck of a run. Just back-to-back games where Razor just picked him at 10. He did kind of switch things up towards the end of the year, didn't he? But, yeah, D-Mac was certainly given the opportunity. You wouldn't say he took it 100% just yet. It was still inconsistent. But first year for Razor, that's perhaps to be expected. And D-Mac is just one of those players who's going to do something brilliant or something nuts, isn't he? So that's number 10. 12 and 13, the midfield, it's largely been Jordie Barrett at 12 and Rico Ioane there at 13. Those guys have both got 60% plus of the game time, around about 2/3 each of their positions. And then the backup for both of these positions is ALB. So Jordie and Rico in black for 12 and 13, and then ALB for both positions in white. It's basically those three guys. There is a little bit of David Havili there in grey at 12, and there's a little bit more of Proctor there at 13, which is a guy that I think we would like to see increase that chunk. But it just depends if he's able to kind of threaten Rico in terms of that starting 13 jersey. Different skill sets to be sure, and there's a lot of pressure on Proctor. Was it against the Japanese team? He got like skinned by the Japanese 13, Dylan Riley. Like he's still growing into the role, so you can maybe understand why Razor hasn't chucked him into the deep end as much. But I feel like we'd like it to be bigger than just over 10% of the game time for 2024. Then the outside backs, Caleb Clark on the left wing, there in black, and Mark Talia is his backup. That's the black chunk and the white chunk with a little bit of Rico Ioane, who's shifted out to the wing at times. And then right wing, Sevu Reece with over half of the game time on the right wing. Now, he's recently been given a second discharge without conviction for some crimes. Now, he shouldn't be playing for the All Blacks if that's the case. If he was not a rugby player, he would probably be, I don't know about in prison, but he'd be serving some kind of sentence, be it home detention or whatever. 2 discharges without conviction because he's a rugby player is nuts. I don't really want to see him playing for the All Blacks ever again. But there you go. That's just my 2 cents. He is there on the right wing with just over half the game time. And he's not been in that good form. They got bloody skinned by BLBRA against France. But anyway, Talia is also his backup. So this is similar to ALB with the midfield, that Talia is the second guy for both wings. And then you've also got Will Jordan a bit of time there on the right wing in grey. And then you got Love and Narawa, who got really, really token time on the right wing there in red and blue. So, yeah, we have plenty of wingers in New Zealand rugby without selecting Sevu Reece, I would say. Fullback is Will Jordan there with just under half the game time, followed by Bodie Barrett. Remember, Bodie, especially towards the start of the season, was getting a bit more game time at fullback than Stephen Perofeta, who's never really been given the keys to run with the position from kind of game to game like we saw with D-Mac this year. He's there with around 15%. Then a bit of D-Mac and a slight touch of Jordie Barrett at fullback, only for a few minutes in a kind of rejig back line. But yes, that is the All Blacks depth chart overall for 2024. I think you can basically see Razor generally in most positions has his first guy and he has his backup, and there's a lot of utility stuff going on. Talia covers both wings. ALB covers 12 and 13. Bodie covers 10 and fullback. D-Mac covers 10 and fullback. Some of the loosies like Blackadder can cover 6 and 7. Jacobson can cover 6 and 7. Savia can cover 6, 7, 8. You know what I mean? There's a lot of kind of utility stuff going on. The main positions that have seen like proper chopping and changing is number 9, which has seen 3 guys given a kind of decent wee chance. Number 6 has also given, a few guys at least a decent chunk of game time. And as I said, I do think the kind of healthiest ones probably like loose head prop looks nice. Fullback looks alright. The fact he got Bodie and Will Jordan, like two very different players, can pull the strings there. And then Stephen Petafeta has also had a bit of game time. Looks alright. So it's not a totally experimental side. It's probably leaning a little bit more towards consistency, their rotation. But yeah, we've still got more squads to look at to compare that to. Now, we also do need to consider with the All Blacks that Razor has an All Blacks 15, which is the kind of B team, which gets to play non-test matches, which is where he does get to have a look at some of these guys. And some of these guys who've been in the All Blacks 15 have ended up in the actual depth chart. You know, the likes of Lakai and Love and whatnot were called up, I think, initially to the All Blacks 15, but eventually got capped by the All Blacks. And you've also had some guys kind of drop their positions down to the All Blacks 15, like Finlay Christie's been playing in the All Blacks 15. You got the likes of Leo Willie, who I think's been in both, and he never got a cap in terms of loose forwards. He's been with the All Blacks 15 and with the All Blacks training squad. Fabian Holland is a lock that they've got a lot of kind of potential. Looking for him at coming forward. He's been with the All Blacks 15. Quintu Paia is a former All Black who's been with the All Blacks 15 for the midfield. I would say Sean Stevenson, but it looks like he's off to Japan. So it's a kind of another bit of experience which will be heading overseas, but such is the way with the kind of selection policy, the way it is. So yeah, that's Razor's side. Now, how does it compare in terms of the total players used? New Zealand are kind of in the lower end of the actual players used. Like, South Africa used 50 players this year. The All Blacks used 42. Ireland also used 42, although Ireland gave their starting guys more game time. Like, they relied more on the starting guys to do more minutes or just more games. Now, the All Blacks had a few games where they shifted things up. Like, they really shifted things up against Fiji. They basically changed the entire side, I think, barring D-Mac. Italy have used the least, but then you got sides like France and Scotland who've used way more because in their mid-year games they basically send entirely different teams. We didn't have that luxury in New Zealand because that was the start of the season. Razor was picking his strongest team. So barring games against like Japan and Fiji, Razor's kept things relatively kind of tight. And there's been a few players among that 42 whose minutes you could basically say, I don't know about irrelevant, but they're not super relevant. Like Plummer with his 3 minutes. I think Narawa and Love got 20. Hotham got like 44. Bell and Lord have only had like an hour, I think, of All Blacks time. So there's not been a heck of a lot of game time for those guys, despite the fact that they are, kind of represented on the chart, and we're kind of counting them up as those 42 players. So there's been a core with a few bolters who have made their way in. Age of the squad is at the kind of older end, younger than the South African and younger than the Irish squads, but third kind of oldest at just over 27 and a half. So there are a few guys who will be leaving, the likes of TJ and Sam Cane, who will bring the average age down, but we will also lose kind of 200, close to 200 caps of experience when they go. That is always the balance of picking experience and not letting them kind of go too long in the jersey. That's the conundrum of being a coach. In terms of the most selected 15 for this year, Tamaiti Williams, Cody Taylor, and Tyrell Lomax is the front row. Only Taylor is in his 30s, so the two props are certainly, like Lomax at 28, properly coming into the peak of his powers soon. And Tamaiti Williams, you feel like has still got improvements he will make. Scotty Barrett and Tupavai. Scotty Barrett's 31. For a captain and a lock, you feel like it's a pretty solid age. And Vai'i at only 24, you feel like also has a lot of room to grow. Satiti, 22. Real youngster, and he's, unless he gets an injury, his ceiling looks really, really high. Savi is 31, and Kane's 32, but again, Kane won't be in that position next year because he will be gone. Ratima and D-Mac, those guys are both in their 20s. Ratima's 23, but as I said, he's got a pretty big battle ahead of him with the likes of Roygaard. D-Mac at 29 is still trying to fight off a more senior Bodie Barrett for that starting 10 jersey. Geordie and Rico are both 27, so the midfield is again at an age where they should be kind of coming into the peak of their powers. Clark at 25, Reese at 27, and Jordan at 26. For most squads, you would say that's not that old, but All Blacks outside backs don't tend to get to 30 and still be playing for the ABs. They tend to get surpassed by somebody else. So, yeah, if somebody else could please surpass Reese, that would be nice. But we'll see if Caleb Clark is able to keep going, and if Will Jordan's able to keep up his try-scoring run, because he is on a heck of a record. But every time we think someone's going to break Doug Hallett's record, it doesn't get done. They seem to fall off a cliff once they hit 27-28. But anyway, that is the All Blacks depth chart for 2024. I hope you guys found it of interest. If so, feel free to subscribe to the channel. There'll be more depth charts coming. And if you want some All Blacks gear, I happen to be an affiliate of the All Blacks channel. Check the link down in the description. There'll be a link to the All Blacks shop. Get yourself an All Blacks jersey or a cap or something, maybe in time for the holidays. But yes, you guys let us know your thoughts on the All Blacks. Does Razor need to rotate more? Are you happy with the consistency? Are you happy with the kind of age of the squad? You guys let us know your thoughts, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.